Thank you, Gerald. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shweta Arya. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Delaware Interfaith Power and Light. We are a faith-based environmental nonprofit. We're one of the 40 state affiliates of National Interfaith Power and Light, and we have been around for over a decade, working with faith communities and addressing climate change. And how we work is through 3 pillars. We help congregations become energy efficient and climate resilient and adapt renewable energy, transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. We also advocate for clean energy policies. And lastly, we educate our communities on how climate change impacts us on everyday life, how it's impacting our health, also empower our faith communities to do more on climate action. So Climate Conversation Program, as you see, is funded by Energize Delaware, and we're very thankful for their funding. We're very proud that so far we have done over 60 of these climate conversations so far and have engaged over 2,000 people. And we've done that in person, in small groups, online, like this, really creating spaces for having dialogues on climate change, learning about, how climate change is hurting us, but shifting the dialogue from gloom and doom to one that is filled with opportunity, where folks can take action and do something about it. So tonight's climate conversation is on solar, and we really want to empower and give every tool to our congregations to consider going solar. It's really, it can be very complicated. And can I please ask everybody to please mute yourself during the presentation, please? So we're very excited to have some of these experts come and share their expertise today with us. So, we really feel that, that congregations have a role to play on climate action. And it is our moral obligation to act on climate. And this is one way they can show their leadership in the community. So let's learn from the experts. And if I can move to the next slide. All right, well, I'll just stop sharing now. But well, let me just invite our first speaker. And we're starting from the bottom, I guess. Joy Baxter, she's in Pennsylvania. She's with Clean Energy Co-op, Southeast Pennsylvania chapter chair. And I know she's very knowledgeable, and she's worked with a lot of congregations on solar. So she'll kind of walk us through the process of how, if a congregation wants to get started in this journey, what steps they can take. So Joy, the floor is all yours.
Great. Can everybody see the slides? Okay. So first, I just want to introduce myself. I am a full-time volunteer implementing climate solutions. I have a background in chemical engineering. I've had solar on my home since 2013. I am the Green Team Chair of St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, where we recently got solar. I am the Southeast Chapter Chair of the Clean Energy Co-op and also on my local EAC. In addition to that, I am a Creation Care Ambassador. So when you're looking at, do you put or can you put solar on your house of worship? I'm going to go through some steps. First of all, when I talk about solar, I am specifically talking about solar photovoltaics, which means that you're using solar panels to convert sunlight to electricity. So forgive my shorthand, from now on, I'll just say solar. So first is the investigation. And however your congregation is set up or organization is set up. This could be done by an individual or a committee, but basically what you're going to try to find out is your location suitable for solar and how to pay for it. After that, you're going to try to make the case to either a committee or multiple committees and try to see if you can get some buy-in after you obviously decide that solar would be good for your organization. Now, if solar is not good for your organization, that is not the end of your creation care journey. There are so many other things that you can do as an organization. Looking at your heating system is huge. So don't despair if solar isn't right for your congregation. After making the case for solar, you want to get congregational buy-in. And I know in some organizations, this isn't necessary financially to do, but I think it is good to do, not just because you want people personally invested in the decision, but also the more you have the conversation of why you want to do solar, the better it is for the organization. You'd never know how those conversations are going to percolate beyond your organization. And then the last thing is installation and celebration. It's one thing to have the conversations, and it might turn out that solar doesn't work. Having the conversations is important, but also having the celebration is important. Get the advertisement out there, and really connect it to the reason why your faith community or organization is doing solar. So I'll go through these in a little bit more detail now. So is your house of worship suitable for solar? There are basically 3 different types of ways solar can be installed. Most of the time, for a small system, you're going to see it being roof mounted. One of the big reasons for this is because it costs more to mount it in a parking lot or ground mounted, especially in areas that don't have a lot of space. Roofs are just there ready as a place to put solar. Now, you'll also have to find out, is your roof good for solar? Oh, I forgot one big thing. Is it sunny? This is important. So one of the things that you can use as a tool, even before going to a solar installer, is to get a rough idea is if you can just Google a project sunroof, and it gives you essentially a temperature map. And yellow is good. Yellow, that's about the best you can do in this area for sun. And so if you have areas that are bright yellow or kind of yellow, those are great areas for solar. Now Google did not do every area. I did check some places in Southern Delaware, and they just didn't do it. So in those cases, you just go to, you just ask a local solar installer for that information. How old is your roof? This is a big one. So solar has a lifetime. The units, a lot of the pieces are warranted for 25 years, and the expected lifetime is beyond that, 30 plus. So you kind of have to match the age of the roof for solar. So depending on if it's a sloped roof or you're essentially putting a roof over a roof, which is great. You're extending the lifetime of your roof. And you want to more carefully match, if you're on a flat roof, the age of the roof to things. So the best time to install solar is when the roof is new, or if the roof really needs replacing, because you can get 30% now with the Inflation Reduction Act, you can get 30% of your roof cost back as direct pay. So the best time is if you have a new roof or you're just going to replace it. Again, here, parking lot canopies are about 35% more and ground mounted about 9% more. So how are you going to pay for it? So the newly passed Inflation Reduction Act is a huge game changer for nonprofits. And the main reason is because what the regular homeowners and businesses have been able to get in tax benefits, now nonprofits are able to get that 30% back as a direct payment. Now this, the details of this have not been fleshed out, but most likely this would have to be money that's floated by the organization and then repaid by the government. So what this means is to figure out how you would pay for it. Before you would have essentially 3 options, but only one would be really financially beneficial, is third-party ownership. But now buying the system in cash or financing it through a loan are now not only beneficial, but together, and the other speakers are going to speak on these things in detail, so I'm just going to glance over it. But with the Delmarva grant and the Energize Delaware financing, you can be anywhere between 4 to 12 years to break even. So that means you might have a large capital cost at the beginning, but this is not a normal capital expense. This is not replacing your heater. This is, that heater is going to start paying you money from day one, and you're going to break even. Well, in this case, the solar, you're going to break even between 4 to 12 years, depending on these grants. And then after that, you're just going to be making money. So this is important to kind of, it's a completely different thing to spend money on than what we're used to. So it's important to keep that in mind. So one of the things also is you need to make sure the people who are works is generally, it's connected to the grid, which means that if you are generating electricity here and you are generating more than your building needs at that time, it will feed to the business and it will feed to the grid. If you are only making partially the amount of solar, it will go to the grid, or you will go to your business, and it will come from the grid. And at night, it will only come from the grid. So you see here the panels, they provide electricity, they go to power the things in the building, and then the excess gets put to the grid. So essentially your grid acts like a battery. You don't need to have a battery backup system. So especially for houses of worship, the reason for doing this usually should be more than just it's a good financial decision, which it is. But solar installations are good creation care. If you guys are not familiar with Project Drawdown, I definitely suggest checking them out. They rank rooftop solar as the number 10 solution in the world for reversing global warming. But, and this has to be said, the best return on your investment is going to be energy efficiency, insulation, LEDs, doing all of those things. It's possible in my church's case, we were not going to be producing more electricity than we were needing. We were just doing a fraction. So we could do these in tandem. If you're trying to get 100% of your usage done by solar, then you want to try to get these energy efficiency things done first. I do want to back up. Actually, I'll just go on here. Why install solar for houses of worship? So it's good creation care. It will, well, here I use this slide from my church. It will save your organization money and enable you to do other things, either creation care initiatives or other ministries. And it's hopefully visible and sets a good example in the community. And I'd say also for an organization that has lots of committees, solar works for 30 plus years. You have to make the decision once. Once that decision is made in your organization, you're going to be getting returns over and over again, where a lot of other initiatives that you do take a lot more investment each year. Getting congregational buy-in. So this can be done in a couple different ways. For my church, we put out a fact sheet and had informational meetings. And also in our case, the way we paid for it, we needed a congregational vote. So everybody had buy-in to the decision, which I think is important. The other thing, well, I lost that thought. Let me go forward. Oh, the next thing is getting press. So I thought this would be a little easier than it was for me. I spent about a day sending out press releases and other things. But in the end, we did get in the Inquirer and talked about our installation and other places. And we have had congregations contact us to get information. And when I go out to other congregations, generally what I try to do is answer those investigation questions. I'll look at their system, see if it's, ask about their roof and show them some financials. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about generally the Clean Energy Co-op. For Delaware, we are not a financing institution for Delaware, but if you happen to be from Pennsylvania or know people in Pennsylvania, we do help with loans or third-party ownership. And the way it's done is by people just like you and me becoming members and putting their money and investing in the co-op, is so that organizations who don't have the money up front then can get the installation with no money down. So I invite you, anybody can become a member, even if you're from Delaware. Here's 4 of our projects. We now have 6. And I think it's a great way of community investing. And she said, did you want to take questions at the end?
Yes, please. That'll be perfect. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And now I would invite Dale Davis from CMI. Dale, where are you? And if you want to unmute yourself and just share about your experience of working with congregations in the state of Delaware, and just talk about a little bit about Delaware-based financing options that congregations have. So Dale, floor is all yours.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm Dale Davis with CMI Electric. We've been installing solar in Delaware, Southeast Pennsylvania, and over on the Eastern Shore for about 22 years. I'm also president of the Delaware Solar Energy Coalition and sit on the Renewable Energy Task Force for the state of Delaware. So in those 22 years, I've also been active both politically and regulatory, working with the Public Service Commission and DENREC and the legislature to get solar to be a little bit more friendly in Delaware. And so far, we've got a very good situation in Delaware. We've installed solar, I guess, on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 churches in Delaware, starting with Limestone Presbyterian. And most recently, we did some work for Westminster Presbyterian, and we're in the middle of installing another system for them. One that we're going to use the new ITC direct pay as part of that project. So that'll be interesting. A couple of things that have come up in those experiences that I would like everybody to be aware of is, as Joy said, it's really good to get an energy audit first. Even if you're in Pennsylvania, where you're not required to get energy audits, it certainly can't hurt to find out what your real energy balance looks like at your building prior to investing in solar or anything else, really. So having that piece of information, I think, is critical. Another key thing is to make sure that as part of your installation process, you get a structural analysis. We found that all but the newest, most modern churches have some very unusual construction methods have been employed over the years. And having that structural analysis before putting additional weight on the roof is critical, especially if you're a flat roof and you're doing a ballasted system. But even one of the slope roofs, it's still important. We like to see, as Joy said, make sure the roof's modern. We run into a bunch of different roof types. We run into, flat roofs, membrane roofs where we put ballasted systems down, standard shingled roofs like you'd see on a house that, use splash systems, standing seam and other metal roofs, which have to have different types of attachments. And make sure you review those attachment points with your installer, how they're going to do that, because there's a lot of different ways that happens, some good, some bad. So you want to make sure you get your attachments through into your roof and holding the solar on are the right kind of attachments. One of the things I'd like to say about funding, especially in Delaware, we've got a good situation in Delaware. If you're a Delmarva Power Company, there's the Green Grant Program, which currently is providing $1.50 a watt for solar for nonprofits. I don't know that that's going to stay that high for very long now that we have the direct pay. I suspect it'll get dropped more to the level that we see for the regular private people and for-profit companies that can take the tax credit directly, and that's going to be down to 80 cents a watt. So that's very nice. The loan program funded by the SEU or Energize Delaware is phenomenal. They loan at a very low interest rate, and I'm sure we'll hear some more about that in a little bit. But they loan at a very low interest rate and with no fees to the dealer or the loan originator. So that saves huge amounts of money in Delaware. Really the only way to finance in Delaware is using the Energize Delaware, and nothing else makes sense. The churches we have worked with have had a number of different types of methods of paying for it. We've had churches that have run fundraisers and raised all the money for the solar before they install the solar. Quite often there's some donors involved, and some of the churches have some significant donors who put up for a big part of the system, maybe even all of the system. That's happened a couple of times. We've even had a system, we for Christ Church, where we built a system with battery backup in a trailer, like a utility trailer, and shipped it down to the Dominican Republic to the Yolanga Village and put it together up on their community house so that they had a reliable source of power to power some refrigeration and hospital type stuff, because the community was remote enough that power was anything but reliable. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, besides the mounting method, you probably just want to make sure that your installer is a good installer. So NAPSIP certification will help that a lot. NABCEP, NAPCEP certified installers. Having an electricians actually do the electrical work is important. In Pennsylvania, there's a lot of non-licensed electrical work that goes on because there's not statewide licensing for electricians in Pennsylvania. So you just want to make sure that, this is a seriously electrical system and you want to make sure that it's done right. So having the correct installer, I would just do your due diligence, probably get, it's always good to get more than one price for sure. Because you'll see a lot of different types of systems, a lot of different ways. There's a lot of ways you can save money in solar, lower cost panels, lower cost inverters. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not so good. So having reliable advice from an installer. Every church we've done has been by committee, and usually those committees are pretty advanced. Most of the churches have somebody who's seriously financially acclimated on that committee. There's usually a couple of retired DuPont engineers who are very good at going into the details and asking questions, and that's helpful, because that really helps make sure that you get the system you want that's going to have the performance you want. So I would certainly encourage you to talk to your members at your church and try to identify those people with levels of expertise that can help do analysis of the proposals you get to make sure you're picking the right one. Let's see. The other thing I would say is that while we do some carports, they can definitely add cost to your system, and not just the cost of the mounting, which can be 35% more than mounting it anywhere else would be. But you also have to consider the additional costs of repairing your parking lot and changing your whole parking structure. What you're going to do about lighting underneath those things if you are going to do anything. So they look great, but they are probably the most expensive way to get solar. But it does utilize land that otherwise might not be very useful for anything else other than parking cars on. Ground mounts are great, but they do the ground mounts take up a surprisingly large amount of ground. If you think about the size of an array up on a roof, and take that whole roof and put it on the ground, it becomes massive. So, that's usually land that you might have a higher purpose for other things in the future. So I would certainly concentrate on roof mounts to the extent that you can if you've got a good roof mount situation. The ITC direct pay, that's a very interesting new wrinkle. Being able for nonprofits to get that 30% directly reimbursed to them is a game changer. Because in the past, nonprofits either had to just accept that their return was going to be lower, or they had to go to a third party like a PPA, which financially is nowhere near as attractive. I mean, while you're getting solar, you're really just kind of exchanging the solar or the utility company power bill for the PPA power bill. So being able to self-finance either through loans or fundraising, it just transforms the financial availability of solar for nonprofits. Further on the ITC, there are some there's like an additional 10% for using American-made materials, which is kind of tough right now. We've lost most of our American manufacturing of solar, so what little bit there is here is in short supply and hard to get. But I think that will change over the next couple of years. There's also an additional 10% for serving low-income communities. Some churches might be able to take advantage of that benefit. And there's supposed to be another 10% for installing in areas that have been damaged by power production in the past. And those maps are being drawn. So hopefully in the future, sometime in the future, we'll know where those areas are. And if your church happens to lie in one of those areas, there might be additional 10% direct pay available for you. So that was pretty much what I was going to talk about. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at the end.
Thanks so much, Dale. That was very helpful. And now I would like to invite Keith. Let me try this. Modzelewski. Keith,
you butchered it a little bit there.
Okay, sorry.
It's not as easy as Davis or Baxter. So it's Modzelewski. So I'm with Energize, Delaware. I've been in the solar industry for about the last 12 years now as a solar consultant for various projects from most residential to commercial scale, and some projects for churches and nonprofits as well. I've been with Energize Delaware for the last 4 months now, so I'm still relatively new to joining the organization, but it's a great organization to be able to help your churches be able to take advantage of energy efficiency projects. So as Dale mentioned, doing an energy audit ahead of time is hugely advantageous, especially if you're starting to get into larger churches, to really understand where your energy is going and where your energy needs are. And through Shweta, we're able to actually finance a large majority, if not the entire cost of doing those energy audits on the home, on your place of worship, so that it's one less hurdle that you have to go through trying to find funds to be able to do that. And then there's a seed grant program through her organization as well, which is going to provide 50% up to $6,000 of funding to be able to do some of the beginning energy efficiency projects to help start to reduce your energy needs within your congregation. And then, there's the funding with the depending on your utility company, your funding is going to vary depending on the grants that you can get. So Dale mentioned that it was a $1.50 a watt for Delmarva Power customers. That caps out at $55,000. So that's a pretty substantial chunk you can take off the cost of a system to be able to do that. And you should talk with whoever the installer is that you're looking at to be able to look through which grants are available. The direct pay with the ITC is going to be huge. I think there's going to be a huge window there to be able to really offset a lot of your costs to begin with that 30% there. And then the important thing that Energize Delaware is doing is our low interest loans for congregations, nonprofits in general. And so when we talk about low interest loans, we're talking 2% is where we're currently at for our loan rate. And we'll finance up to 100% of the cost of a project, as long as there's guaranteed savings. So as Joy mentioned, this is not a this is not an investment into a boiler or a heater, which is going to require a large capital investment. This is redirecting funds that your congregation is already paying. You currently have a budget for your energy needs to run your congregation. So if you could take that same money and put it into something that's going to guarantee reducing how much your operating costs are for your business, sorry, I've been dealing with businesses all day today, for your congregation, then it's going to be, it's a win-win-win for everybody. It's doing something better for the planet, it's reducing your operating costs, and it's giving you a way to, really make a statement piece into your community. And so a couple of resources that I'm going to share with you guys. Let's see here if I can get the share screen to work. All right, you should see a Chrome browser now. Yes, thumbs up, we're seeing it. Okay, perfect. So if you go to the Energize Delaware website, you'll be able to find under public and nonprofits, the Energize low interest commercial loan program. This is where you can start to get some of that initial information about what the loan specifies and what we'll finance. So we'll finance up to $2 million for a project. So it's pretty extensive. And as I said, it has to have guaranteed savings. So when we say guaranteed savings, that means it has to cost your congregation at least 10% less in what your monthly bill is versus what you would have been paying if you didn't put solar on your house, on your congregation. So there's going to be at least a minimum built-in 10% there. With the direct pay for the ITC, I think that's going to be probably something that we're going to want to look at even more closely, just because you're going to be able to not have to take out a loan for as long. And so we'll do up to a 20-year term. So it's a very long term to be able to look at this. But as Joy mentioned, there's a lot of life left after for a solar array, even after 20 years. You still have at least another 10 to 15 years minimum on that. Honestly, in my experience, we're quoting lifetime of roof replacement, not lifetime of solar replacement. So if you're putting this onto a new roof, you're going to be getting the full length of time that the solar will function out of this. And it's going to start to just continue to put money back into the church by reducing your operating costs, even after the loan has been paid off. Solar is a lot to digest. There's a lot of nuances that go into this. And so when you're starting to look at it, there has not really been a one-stop shop for Delaware to be able to say, this is a resource for you that is trying to be as non-biased as possible to be able to help you educate yourself. And so solardelaware.org, we launched this 2 months ago. It's still a work in progress, but it's our attempt to be that one-stop educational piece for you to be able to find resources. It also has a list of contractors that have been vetted through DENREC to be able to help you start to figure out where to start to turn to look for proposals. And so we kind of cover as much as possible in there. Honestly, I would love to ask for anybody that uses this as a resource, please send me some feedback. We're still testing this. And so if you guys could look at this as you're thinking about this for approaching this for our congregation, tell me what we're missing so that we can help you and we can help the next congregation get there even easier. And then
Keith,
if you go through, yes.
Keith, do you have a section on congregations on there for any, or maybe, will it?
It falls under nonprofits right now.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Yeah, so that would be the area that I would tell you to go to for that.
Okay.
To start to dive into where that is and start to get a list, start to go through and just formulate some of the questions that you have. We're also available as a non-biased resource to be able to, when you start to get 3 or 4 different proposals from different organizations and you're trying to figure out how to compare apples to apples, we're happy to step in and help with that. And there is a list of quite a long list of solar providers that have been vetted through DENREC that are listed on here. It's not an all extensive list, and it's definitely not anybody that's not anybody that we are endorsing one way or the other. But it's just a good starting point to try and figure out who's servicing the area. One of the things that I will tell you for congregations that are in Southern Delaware and Kent County to start to look at early on is going to be where DEC, Delaware Electric Co-op, has red zones. There's a lot of areas, especially in Sussex County, that are not going to allow solar because of the infrastructure that's down there currently with the substations. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're starting to go through this, and ask that question early, because I would hate for people to go through this committees with their organizations and all of a sudden get to, yes, we're really, really excited about putting solar on our congregation, to find out that it's not eligible or for some reason it can't be installed. And then the last thing is, I would say, take a look at the DENREC's website for looking at resources for where your utility company is for your congregation. You'll find 3 major categories for Delaware. You have Delmarva Power, you have Delaware Electric Co-op, and then you have the municipalities, or DMECs, which are where a lot of the smaller townships fall into. Each of them have their own application process for getting through the building code to get permits. And so, as well as get the approval for interconnection, which is basically turning the system on. And so that's basically what I wanted to get across with you guys. I will post these links up in the chat here, and happy to take any questions when we get to that point with Shweta organizing it.
Thank you so much, Keith. This was wonderful. And, you know, when we are going to share the recording, and we are also going to share all the links that all our panelists are sharing. And now I will like to invite, hey, Keith, can you stop your screen share?
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Okay, and now I will invite Irfan Patel from Islamic Society of Delaware to share their experience. ISD got their solar installation around 2 years, Irfan, is that right? And
just about 2 years ago.
yeah, so we thought it'll be really nice for folks to hear from congregations directly who have gone solar, what kind of objections they faced in the beginning, what kind of funding you use, what kind of obstacles or or maybe which installer you used, if you have any advice for our folks that are looking to go solar now. So Irfan, share your advice with us.
Yeah, thank you, Shweta. Good evening, everyone. My name is Irfan Patel. I'm the Interfaith Chair for the Islamic Society of Delaware, and I'm also a former board member of Delaware Interfaith Power and Light. So a great organization. So as the largest nonprofit organization for the Muslim community in Delaware, right? We are the largest Islamic center, which is Islamic Society of Delaware. So obviously, we have been looking at ways to optimize our operations cost, right? And then obviously, energy cost savings was one area we have been focusing on primarily. And then a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic hit, right, we utilized a select program that was available at that time. Not sure if those programs are available now. I'm sure there are many more grants that are now available for the places of worship. So we used that as an opportunity to achieve significant cost savings in energy consumption for our Islamic Center. So again, just to give some background, our Islamic Center, if you have been through that area, right, 28 Salem Church Road, it's bustling with activities all the time, right? So we have 5 daily prayers, and we operate almost like 7 days a week, right? On the weekends, we have so many community programs. So obviously, energy consumption was pretty high if you look at the list of our operations cost. So we worked with Clean Energy USA, and then we used I think Shell Brothers, if you recall correctly. They were the ones who did the installation for us. So again, the primary benefits, right? So obviously there was significant financial benefit from cost savings, right? That we were looking to utilize. And what it means for any nonprofit organization is cost saving means we are able to now utilize that funds for other activities, right? That we always wanted to fund, right? Almost all of you here are from nonprofit. You know how challenging it is to secure funding. So that was one of the primary benefits. And then the financial benefit, we did a projection, right, of how the financial benefit plays out over the course of time, right? So I mean, just to give some numbers in a nutshell, we were looking at a cost saving of close to $5,000, $5,000 to $8,000 per year, right? That's looking at a total annual expense of close to like $15,000 we used to spend on electricity bill. So that's a significant saving, right? They're just per year saving. And then the other tangible benefit is obviously the power and the energy rate is locked in for 20 years, and that's the deal we got from Clean Energy. So all these tangible benefits aside, the other key driver and motivator for us was, I mean, obviously we as an Islamic society, right, really wanted to play a role in reversing global warming, right, to opt for clean source of energy, right? That was our key driver, key motivator, I would say, apart from the financials, right? As you know, one of the most popular hadith, right, which is the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on environment, that states the earth is green and beautiful, and Allah, the God Almighty, has appointed all of us as his stewards over it, right? Which reiterates the Quranic teaching that human beings have been given the responsibility of guardianship over the natural resources that has been given to us. So those are the two key drivers. And I know, Shweta, you also wanted me to briefly explain the process that we went through, right? So our Islamic Center is governed by a board of directors, right? We have 21 board of directors, all elected by the community. So we did do our due diligence in terms of our cost benefit analysis, if you will, right? And then we presented that to our board of directors and secured the approval for that, right? And obviously, I mean, it was a no-brainer, right? Once we showed the pros, obviously we couldn't even find any cons, right? To be fair. So that's how we went about it. In terms of like I said, we just did this just over 2 years ago, just before the pandemic hit. We are still in the process of collecting all the data points, right? As you know, our in general, our energy consumption has slightly gone down because of the pandemic, right? Because obviously we're not doing so many in-person activities. Now that those are picking up, so we're going to start collecting data points to show the net value, which, I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that we will be seeing huge benefits.
Thank you so much, Irfan. This was really helpful. And I'm sure folks will have some questions, but lastly, I would like to invite Ken Copeland from St. Mark United Methodist Church. So how Ken's congregation is different is that they had installed solar a decade ago, unlike Irfan's congregation, which recently adopted that. So there is a difference in perspective. So Ken, could you walk us through your journey of how your congregation started, if they faced any obstacles back then, and if you think things have changed, or where and talk about the savings and your reason for the congregation to go solar, so back in the early days.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to participate. I'm Ken Copeland. I'm currently head trustee at St. Mark's. St. Mark's, just to give a bit of background, our church building was built in 1962 with a social hall built in 1970. Early on, it was an oil-fired boiler. We converted to gas-fired in the early 90s. And we sit on the corner at the intersection of routes 4 and 7 in Stanton. We do get a lot of traffic passing through there. If you're familiar with the area, sometimes they're not passing, they're sitting there probably looking at our roof line. That is very congested there. The building itself, we had the benefit of a large southern exposure on our roof line. We have a sloped roof facing south that we were able to take advantage of that. And when this came up, I was not involved with trustees at the time, so I may call on Dale to correct me if I get anything wrong, but CMI was the contractor who did the installation and may be familiar or a lot more familiar with some of the installation ins and outs the details that we dealt with. The installation itself, I believe, was fairly favorably received by the congregation. The proponent for the installation at that time was the former head of trustees, who was an engineer and really felt strongly about the concept. And so the panels were put on, and I don't believe, and I've been involved with trustees now for the last 6 or 7 years on and off, and we really haven't had any problems to speak of in that time. And I don't know that there were any real problems prior to that. So the reliability of the system has been very, very good. Now we were looking I think to save some money, and I'm not sure how well that worked out because we did take out a loan, and at some point it was my understanding that the payback that we were getting was significantly reduced, and that we took a pretty heavy hit on that. But we've overcome that. We were able to refinance with another lending institution, and we're able to do a lot more favorably with them. Actually, it was just this past October that we paid off the solar panel, so now we're home free. The installation, it's all gravy from here, I suppose. The only problem that I'm aware of in the past several months, we did have a roof leak, and it was identified as being near the peak of the roof. And in order to fix it, they had to replace some shingle that was, some of it was just above the top panel. So they had to remove a panel, unfasten it, make the repair. I called CMI and was given the green light that it would be okay to do that. And we haven't had a problem. The roof, the leak was repaired, and we're back on track. So that's kind of where we're at with that. We only had 1 month, I believe, and I guess it's been about 12 years now since we've had them on. 1 month where we had a very small electric bill, and that was, I believe, on a February month where we had a lot of snow and a lot of cloudy weather, and it wasn't a big bill, but it was a bill. So that's pretty much what we've had to deal with. I'm hopeful now that, if we can get another 12, 15 or more years out of it. We had a reasonably new roof on when we had this done. So hopefully we can ride the success of this, for another well over a decade. That's about what my experience has been. We do have a plaque that cites how many tons of different pollutants that we've avoided over the years, and kilowatt hours that have been generated. So the only thing that we do is the last day of the month, go in, take a reading on the inverters and report that. And that's been all we've had to do, really.
Thank you so much, Ken. And now what I'll do is I'll bring all the panelists, do a spotlight for all the panelists here. I can find everybody. So if anybody has any questions for our panelists, this will be your time to ask your questions. You are welcome to unmute yourself or put it in the chat box.
I'd like to ask you a question if I could.
Sure.
My church is probably not atypical for many. It's got a large boiler in the basement that's running on fuel oil and baseboard heating. And we'd certainly love to replace it with something that's solar thermal. Obviously, it's a big expense. It's a big cost. And I think what I heard somebody saying, I think it was Keith, was that even to replace that with something that is electric or solar friendly would not be covered by the loan. Is that the case?
That's not the case. We do have some commercial loan programs for nonprofits that will handle some of those upgrades to transition to more energy efficient projects too.
Okay, great. And then a second question. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, to start with, I would go through SWETA to have an energy audit done to find out what the actual replacement cost would be for that, the heater and the baseboards, and figure out what your energy draw is. In a lot of cases, it might be beneficial to switch over to an all electric system. And then if you have the roof space, put the solar on to offset that, as opposed to looking for a more complicated solar array that could be doing solar heating like you're talking about.
Yeah, no, we're getting the audit done. I think January we're scheduled for. And then will the audit also tell me how much electricity I'm likely to create if we use the roof of the parish hall to put the arrays on? That I can then use that as...
The audit is only going to look at what your energy consumption is at the facility, not what your system, a potential system could produce. I would encourage you to reach out to somebody like Dale to have a look at after your audit's done, to say, this is how much solar you can fit on your roof and this is how much it's going to produce.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any other questions? Gerald, do you see any questions in the chat? Tim, you had some questions. Do you want to just unmute yourself and read it?
Sure. So somebody mentioned doing a structural analysis for the roof before installing. Is that something that's done by the installer, or is that done by a structural engineer, or how do we go about finding that resource?
Yeah, Tim, I'll take that one. Your installer should engage a structural engineer. You do want it done by an actual structural engineer who will give you a stamped report. You certainly could do it yourself independently with the installer, especially if you're going to get several different installers to give you quotes. That way you would already have the structural analysis. We've worked with a couple of churches that have done it that way. But for sure, your installer, if it's not already done, should be doing it. If your installer wants to skip that step, you probably want to move on to a different installer.
And somebody else, or maybe it was you, mentioned that there are different types of systems available. Do they have different weights or different characteristics that would affect how the structural analysis was done? I mean, do we need to decide on what type of system before we get the structural analysis done?
That's going to depend on your roof type. If you're talking about a shingled roof, like a regular, asphalt type shingle roof, then all the different installers are going to be installing essentially the same system. The panels are all going to weigh roughly the same. So that's not too critical. If you're installing on a flat roof, then...
Which I think we would be.
Okay. Then you're probably, if it's a membrane roof, you're probably going to want a ballasted system, meaning the system that's basically held down by the weight of the system and additional ballast stone that are put underneath the racks. And in that case, it's good to have a design already, because there's a lot of variation in both the total loading of the roof and the point loading. So the individual design is what needs to be evaluated on your roof if you're doing a flat roof. Now, you can do an attached system on a flat roof, meaning you go into the structural part of the roof and flash everything, but that's a lot less common these days because it's a lot more opportunity for leaks to occur.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
I would like to chime in that when we did our installation, or before we did our installation, we were going to be installing on 200-year-old homes that are part of our campus. And there was concern about the structural analysis. Now in Pennsylvania, the structural analysis is required. But what we decided to do is pull it out front. So we partnered with a solar installer. They had their structural people the structural engineers who they work with. And so we just answered all the congregational questions about that before we had to make the decision whether to go forward with solar. So in our case, that was helpful to pull out up front.
I had another question also. Is there regular maintenance that needs to be done on the solar system per se?
No.
Or is it pretty much just the roof that you deal with?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one again. Most solar arrays require very little maintenance. They're usually kept reasonably clean just by the actions of the rain and the tilt on the panels. There's not a lot of electrical maintenance to be done. If you have good monitoring on your system, it'll catch any developing problems that can be responded to before they're an issue. If you're in a situation where you've got a high amount of dirt hitting the panels, we've got one on top of a bakery down in Washington that, the amount of dust that they kick out of their vents, their exhaust vents, is pretty high, and that one gets washed periodically. And we've got a couple agricultural systems that need washing if they plow the fields and the wind's blowing in the wrong direction. But otherwise, most systems take very little care. Unless you get some squirrel damage or something like that, there's just very little to be done to them.
Thank you. I'd invite David Oslin. David, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, so a couple questions back to the energy audit. So the University of Delaware came out and did an energy audit a few years ago. And from that, we replaced some appliances and went to all LED. But we still spend a lot of money in electrical every month. Would we be wiser to think about getting another energy audit? Is there a value in that? And then solar versus dealing with HVAC. So half of our building is water, cold and hot water. And half the building is a hodgepodge of little heat pumps.
So in terms of the energy, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joyce. In terms of your energy audit, David, your energy audit that was done by the University of Delaware is good for 5 years. It's probably not worth it if it's only been a couple of years for you to redo it at that point.
Are they one of the places that do it, I guess? Is that?
Yes, we work with the University of Delaware's IAC, which I'm going to draw a complete blank of what that acronym stands for, to work on to finance the energy audits for congregations.
Okay. I mean, I was not impressed with, they didn't make any comments about windows and insulation and stuff like that. It was really strictly electrical stuff.
So they don't usually do energy reviews for windows, but they usually do have some type of energy audit for their for insulation now. So if that was something that was not done, David, I'm happy to connect with you offline and see if that would be something that'd be worth coming back to.
Okay. And then
David, David, I can be, you can probably be in touch with me. I can connect you with, I think, Professor Keith, who must have done the audit, and maybe we can touch base with him and see if he can do a quick review and maybe add windows, because we've done that for congregations. Sometimes the congregations need some window inserts. There is a program called Windows of Hope that there's a separate project to do that for congregations, which is really helpful.
And then I guess the bigger question for us is where to spend our energy, so to speak, in the beginning, thinking about solar or thinking about upgrading the HVAC system.
I wanted to comment on that. So I don't know if you've done a greenhouse gas audit. I know at my church, about 50% or maybe 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from heating, but we have a monster of a heating system that needs to be addressed. So one way to make that decision is doing a greenhouse gas audit to see where you're going to be doing a big change. And I'd also, you have to think about when your systems are up for changing and how old your roof is. If your roof is fairly new, you want to do the solar now. and then do the other. I mean, you want to do both, but you have to use some of these other inputs to figure out which one. At least that's my advice.
That would be nice if there was unlimited money. But yeah,
David, one of the other things that I would encourage you guys to look at with your church is your on-demand electric consumption for
Yeah.
your utility company. That could be something that is significantly driving up the cost of energy for your congregation. Basically what it is depending on how much energy you're consuming at one specific time, and churches get into this a lot, especially on Sundays. You can be getting hit with monthly charges that the utility company is saying, just because you might go over a certain kilowatt hour usage on one day of the week, they're charging you a minimum fee for that. And so if you are looking into that, it could be an option where if you put solar on, it can knock you down a tier and help significantly reduce the cost right off the bat with that, after you go through an adjustment period with the utility.
yeah. So we looked into solar a number of years ago, and we were called a medium tier something with the electrical, and they told us actually that it wouldn't pay to put on solar.
Yeah, so that's changed in the last about year and a half. So many years ago, like he said, if you could get your monthly usage below 3,000 kilowatt hours a month, you could come out of that medium general demand and drop into a non-demand tier. Then Delmarva started to say no, that it was netted kilowatt hours don't count. And it was ended up being a court case and was found in favor of solar customers. And so now you can net your credits, and if you can get your annual your monthly consumption below 3,000 kilowatt hours a month, including your netted credits, you can come off of that medium general demand tariff.
Oh, wow.
And David, for replacing your HVAC system, do look at the low cost loan that is offered by Energize Delaware. That can be helpful for you to kind of consider both options, whether going solar or replacing your HVAC, and then you can make the best decision.
Thank you.
One of the things you might want to look into with the low interest loan, David, is if you are going through the solar opportunity, you might be able to take that 30% from the ITC as a direct pay into paying down the cost of your replacing your heating system, and then doing a second loan with Energize Delaware.
How competitive are these ITC grants going to be? Like, it's not going to be with so many, right? Or
they're unlimited as far as I understand.
oh, is that the 30%?
Yep. It's
That's
offered
awesome.
to all nonprofits. I'd like to invite Francisco. You had a question. Would you like to unmute and ask?
What thing? Yes, I'm on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I actually have a question and maybe a couple of comments. The question is, how do you go about sizing the system? Because people have a tendency to think that the energy produced is constant, but as days get shorter during the year, and also there is a cyclical amount of irradiation that changes during the day. So you cannot expect the system to be producing energy on a constant basis. So that's one of the things that people need to be reminded of. And it's always good to actually get familiar with the vocabulary that is used in the industry, so you understand better what your decision will be.
Yeah, so I can talk about the sizing question. So, with net metered solar, you can overproduce in any month and create credits that you then use in a month that you underproduce. So the way systems get sized is by looking at your actual consumption over a year or two's period of time. And then if you've got the roof space or the ground space, sizing a system that's production will match that consumption. And when you estimate that production, you have to use shade analysis, an actual tool that you're not just guessing at the production, you get the real production for that building, that situation, compare it to the consumption, and that gives you a very good idea of what size systems needed. It's common to, on some buildings, be able to hit 100%, but on a church that's got a lot of use, if it's a big building and it's got, routine uses, it's got daycares, it's got an active, community going on all the time, those buildings can use more power. You might not be able to get to 100%. Churches that are primarily, weekend type activities and not using a ton of power during the week often can get to 100% power usage. But when you look at solar, even if you only get to 25% usage, that the savings on that 25% of your electricity bill still pay for that 25% system. You'll still have a power bill, obviously, you're paying to the utility, but you get that same return on investment, even if you're only getting 25% of your power.
So you usually oversize the system, once you do the energy consumption analysis, and you go to start designing the system, do you oversize it to make sure if you want 100% coverage?
So in Delaware, we're limited to no more than 110% of your average usage per year over a 2-year period. In Pennsylvania, you could go to 200% if you had a reason to do that. You'd really have to look at why you would want to do, a 200% system to go there. Quite often, the difference between 98 and 105% is a small difference. And, so systems, if you've got the roof space in Delaware, usually get designed around that 100% number. And even in Pennsylvania, it's rare for us to want to go above 100% unless there's some short-term or immediate plans for a significant energy increase, like changing from fossil fuel heat to, heat pumps or something like that.
And Francisco, in terms of understanding vocabulary that's going on in this industry, it does get confusing. If you go to the solardelaware.org website under resources, there is a glossary that's growing. So that hopefully would be something that would be helpful for you to be able to start to get comfortable with some of the language.
Thanks, Keith. That is a great resource indeed. And I see a couple of questions in the chat. So we are at 6:47, so we can just take a couple more. But when we follow up, we will share the emails of our panelists. So if you have any further questions, you can definitely ask them. So Lynn has asked, does adding a solar system change insurance needs or costs?
Yeah, Shweta, I mean, from our experience at ISD, I mean, I can say that there was no impact in our insurance, right? Our insurance stayed the same.
Thank you. Does any of you want to add to it?
Yeah, I would say that you definitely want to check with your insurance agent. If you've got a replacement cost policy, you have increased the value of the property. And so there may be an additional premium depending on how big of a system you put on and what that cost was compared to your replacement of the rest of your building.
And just piggyback on that, but not on the insurance cost of that, but check with your CPA, check with whoever's doing your taxes to make sure that when you're doing your financial analysis for this, that the ITC can be taking advantage of for you, that you can take advantage of the rebates that are out there. And so just use that as another check and balance as you're going through this to make sure that you're getting the best return on your investment.
Thank you. Noel has a question. Is there any rebate available for adding charging stations for the congregations? And I know that DENREC has a rebate. I think it's 95% off on a EV charging station equipment cost. That doesn't cover installation. But that's a great grant right there. And I'm happy to plug you in, Noel, if you want to reach out to me, to the right person who can help you. And I see Tim's hand raised. Tim, if you want to go and ask your question.
Yeah, I was wondering if you install a system and then it turns out you need to replace the roof before the solar system solar system still has lifetime. Can the solar components be recycled and replaced onto the new roof, or do you have to start from scratch, or to what degree can you reuse those components?
I hate to be the one answering all the questions, but we've done a fair amount of that work actually. Because a lot of these systems that we put on 20 years ago, or systems other people put on, are now at that point where roofs need some work. And it's pretty common for us to pull them off, store them, put them right back up. A lot of times we'll have to replace flashings just because they're not really reusable. But other than that, the system comes down, it goes back up, it gets recommissioned and it's back to producing. That being said, I certainly would advise you to make sure your roof's got a good 20, 25 years plus life left in it before you put solar on it.
Thank you.
Is the environmental impact of disposing of the cells is considered in the evaluation of how the CO2 has been addressed?
I can answer that. Yes, NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, has done a study looking at the life cycle analysis of solar panels. It depends a little bit about the emissions of our grid. So I know I've looked at in Pennsylvania what our grid is, and still with considering the end of life and the production of the solar panels, I think we're at 85% better for emissions using solar panels than electricity from solar panels than from fossil fuels.
So you mean the manufacturing of the solar cells, the usage of CO2 generating materials compared to what actually saves in terms of energy production?
Right. So each grid has a certain amount of CO2 that's associated with its, the electricity it produces. And when you compare that with the amount of CO2 or equivalent that was used in producing the panels and for disposing of them, it's still a lot better to use solar.
How about the environmental impact of the disposing of the cells at the end of the useful life?
So that is still, there's ongoing research on that. My husband is a professor at Drexel, and he has projects right now looking at the end of life of solar panels and how to reuse the components.
So at this time, I would just want to add a couple things here and then ask each of the panelists to kind of share their one last advice or resource with everyone who's joined us here. I know we are at the top of the hour, so I want to just also let everybody know that Delaware IPL has programs offered through Energize Delaware to help congregations get energy efficient by conducting no-cost energy audits. And we do that in all 3 counties. So that's a great service and great savings right there. It can run in a couple of thousands of dollars depending on size of your congregation. So please utilize that. Contact us. Gerald, our program coordinator, has shared his email. for Newcastle County and our regional director's email for Sussex and Kent. So please don't forget to contact us if your congregation wants to go solar. That's the first step, right? And then we also offer a seed grant through Energize Delaware up to $6,000. So please contact us. Would love to help you with this journey to renewable energy. And now I would just invite each of our panelists to just share one last advice or any last word that they want to share with our attendees. Joy, you want to go first?
Sure. The one thing that I didn't talk much about is if your congregation is new to thinking about the role of creation care and climate change and how it relates to your faith, that's something that you might want to cement a little bit before bringing up solar, just because that should be what's driving it. I'm a creation care ambassador. There's ones that are closer, probably in Delaware, but reach out if you need resources.
Thank you, Joy. That's a great word. And Delaware IPL, we just do that. We connect faith with stewardship and give you the resources that you need. So please reach out to us. We are your resource here in Delaware. Keith, you want to go next?
Please use us as a resource. We are stewards of the community to be able to help get dollars out the door to help reduce carbon emissions, to be able to help enable solar to happen, to help reduce your carbon footprint for your congregations. That is our one and only mission, is to help make it easier for you to reduce energy needs throughout different avenues, from your energy audits to the seed grants with Shweta to our low interest loans, and being able to be there as a resource. We're a nonprofit organization that's funded by the regional greenhouse gas emissions, and that is our mission, is to get dollars out the door to be able to help your congregations be able to save money on and reduce the carbon footprint in the state of Delaware.
Thank you, Keith. We are just so grateful to have Energize Delaware as a resource. You know, it's I live in Pennsylvania, and I am still looking for a organization like, like Energize Delaware. But so I think we are very fortunate. And what we also add is that, our congregations can start their journey and then educate their community, right? When you do your energy audit, you can also conduct a home energy presentation for your members. When you go solar, you can do a solar presentation for your members. How can they have solar in their homes? So that's the idea. We create a model of sustainability at the congregational level, and then share that resources with the community. Just to piggyback off of that, Shweta, with your congregations, depending on the demographic of who you are, there are low and medium income loan programs out there for your congregation members to be able to take advantage of solar. We do solar loan programs for residents throughout the state of Delaware with pretty minimum requirements to be able to help you do that. And it's probably one of the best interest rates in the market right now, with no origination fees. So, and if anything, what I've learned from my boss, Tony DePrima, is we are a nimble organization. If you have creative ideas on how to be able to reduce your emissions, reduce your costs, or find ways to be better, be green, reach out to us, run your ideas by us. And if we can get creative on figuring out ways to help fund you, we want to do that for you. Thank you. Irfan, any last words?
Yeah, all I can say is, thank you, Delaware IPL, as well as Energize Delaware, for putting together this great program. All I can say is, folks, let's do our bit, right? Let's join the bandwagon. We have all these amazing resources available. Let's do our bit to champion clean source of energy, and let's do our bit to reverse global warming.
Thank you, Irfan. Well said. Ken, do you want to go next?
I think, it's been a very, very good session, very informative. I would say rely heavily on your contractor to work through this with you, and ultimately it's God's green earth that we're looking to preserve. And one thing that didn't get mentioned, that for those considering the installation, would be, we've talked about the roof line and the shingles and all of that. You will need some bit of a footprint for the inverters. We had have a rather large mechanical room in our building, so they fit in very nicely. And perhaps the ones that are being manufactured today take up less of a footprint than before, but I'm sure your contractor would be able to work with you on that.
Thank you, Ken. And last but not least, Dale.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to end with two things. One, with the new ITC, we're seeing 6-year paybacks for nonprofits and ROIs around, or IRRs around 11%. So I know somebody was asking that question. But, you know, when we did Limestone Presbyterian, there was a large banner put on the church that's there today. If you drive up Route 7, you see it all the time. And it's a quote from Psalms 24:10, and it says, "The earth is the Lord's." And Bruce Gillette and his wife, the co-pastors of that church, really created that message at Limestone Presbyterian, that we have a responsibility to care for the earth and do all that we can to do that.
Thank you, Dale. That really sums it perfectly. And guess what? We are on dot. It's 7 o'clock and we wrapped it up on time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This has been such a great session. Again, we have the recording going. We will send you the recording and all the resources. Please get in touch with us if you have any more questions. But
Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Shweta,
you.
for organizing this.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.